with your podcast host Keegan, and this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And today we have a very special guest once again, and his name is Ricardo Zulueta. Sorry, I probably did not say that the best way. Zulueta.
It was perfect. It was good.
So it's great to have you back on again, man. How have you been?
Good, good. Thanks, Keegan. Yeah, it's been, I can't believe it flew by so fast. It was already like 3, 4 weeks ago since we last spoke.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a little bit of time, and
Yeah.
as I've learned in life, a little bit of time can hold a big change. So what's kind of been going on in your life? Because
Well,
we were
what's
talking
fun?
about start day one, right?
Yeah. So we're talking about our nonprofit for anyone that wasn't there the last time. I'm the founder of Start Day One, which is a nonprofit for mental health and suicide prevention with a more proactive approach to helping people instead of reactively waiting for symptoms of mental health issues or suicidal tendencies. So anyway, we love doing things proactive, and basically that's what we discussed at your last show.
Mm-hmm.
That it's something that we're not doing correctly as a society. We're always reacting. We're always
Mm-hmm.
waiting. I mean, I think we talked about like a suicide hotline, and I'm like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so don't talk to me until you're suicidal, like that didn't make sense in my mind, and I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
we should be doing more like, hug your kid today, not when they're not coming out of their room,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But since we were talking, we were talking about how we need to do more.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we started talking, I don't know whether, I think it was off the show, you were mentioning like later down the road, you were talking about potentially coming up with a nonprofit
Mm-hmm.
to help this cause. And that's when I
Yep.
mentioned to you, like, actually you might not have to, because what we're trying to do with Start Day One is incorporate something that actually helps people like you
Mm-hmm.
that are trying to do something in the mental health space and help people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's difficult, so for everyone that's listening, is very difficult to help people and then ask for money. But at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, monetization is very important to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
We dove into purpose really deep, semi deep,
Yeah.
on at your last show. And, that's well and good. And the monetization should come. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, I think we're missing out on the advantages of helping out people like yourselves. There's probably so many that want to help, whether they're
Mm-hmm.
speakers or podcasters. And after speaking to you, it was something I was kind of just dragging along. And you were in the process. I started really brainstorming about how it's going to go, and ended up calling it Podcasts for Prevention.
Oh.
And what we're doing is a basically it's like a joint effort with all podcasters and speakers that are in the mental health space that want to work for someone,
Oh.
where we're basically helping you guys out
Mm-hmm.
by making or doing impactful things in this space, because we know it's
Mm-hmm.
difficult. You speak, but how do you ask for money? When do you ask for money?
Mm-hmm.
But to me, inspiring one person, saving one life is good enough, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
sometimes that's all it really takes. You don't need 10,000 people. I don't need someone with 10,000 followers. I just need someone willing to talk that might hit someone, and we want to help
Mm-hmm.
those people out.
Yep.
We were mentioned about, maybe like someone needs a new camera, a new microphone. Hey, that's going to help our cause, right? But how
Mm-hmm.
do you get that? So
Oh
by
yeah.
allowing you guys to come up with your own teams, for fundraising and getting other people to support your team allows us to kind of track that you're actually putting a lot of effort in, and then
Mm-hmm.
obviously it allows us to give back. So, and it's been great progress. I mean, thank you for your insights and feedback and all that stuff.
Of course. Thank you very much for doing something so great for the mental health community because a lot of people just need help getting just support in general. A lot of advocacy takes place because there's support behind it. No one can really just take such a big social issue and manage it all on their own. Like, there's no way that's really going to happen. Like, there are some examples, but those were great leaders in that space and community. But the thing is, it's really awesome that we can do this in this kind of space with all this technology that we got going on. And technology is what is connecting everyone. So I
Yeah.
think it's great that we get to sit here with uh, computers in front of us, but you get to sit hundreds of miles away from me and we get to have a real time conversation about the same thing.
Yeah.
So,
And what's great too about it is because it allows us to uh, um, kind of expand our message to more
mm-hmm.
people.
Yeah.
The things that we talked about, we're hoping that more people talk about that. People are
Mm-hmm.
talking about mental health, but it's all mostly reactive.
Yeah.
No one is mentioning being proactive and changing people's perspectives about mental health itself.
Mm-hmm.
um, more and more are they kind of know, but no one's talking about it. And it's funny that once you mention it, when it changes someone's perspective, they have a better way of not controlling it, but really understanding it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
like I mentioned, just changing that one aspect where people walking around thinking they're depressed because they have depression. Just
Mm-hmm.
getting rid of that is one step closer to helping someone out because they can't understand how to get rid of it. But it's because, well, you're not getting rid of an emotion. Like that's crazy talk. It's like getting rid of anger, envy. It's something that's instilled, but it's based on your
Mm,
perspective. And
yeah.
no one's saying that. And
Mhm.
the crazy part is doctors are doing it, therapists. I mean, there's so many um, people in society and professionals that are not talking about it. So, by
Mhm.
being able to have podcasters, once you know this knowledge and someone talks, you kind of will look at them and go, I mean, I mean, don't you want to look at the cause though?
Mhm.
I've had that. When I was podcasting, it's very difficult for me to just kind of let things go like that as much as I
Mhm.
wanted to get their information.
Yeah.
But I was kind of adamant with letting him know, like, yeah, but that doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
And that's what made it difficult for me to keep doing podcasting and getting guests
Mhm.
because our um, kind of philosophies were clashing. They
Mhm.
were, they were very reactive and stuck with it. It's kind of like being a doctor and talking about diet with them. They don't know nutrition. They have no
Mhm.
idea.
Yeah.
They only know pharmaceutical drugs. They know what
Mhm.
every drug does and what the results are and this and that. But they're not going to tell you like, well, if you eat avocados, that should get rid of it. So it's a hard discussion.
Mhm. Yeah, and that hard discussion usually leads to great impact once you actually have the discussion, though,
Mm.
because it's kind of like having that uncomfortable conversation with your significant other. It's
Yeah,
easy
that's
to
true.
avoid. It's easy to dodge. You can sit there and just have this like hurt feeling this whole time, and both sides aren't winning. But whenever you
Right,
actually face it head on and you tackle it, you can brainstorm, come up with ideas, figure out what's working, what's wrong, so on and so
right,
forth, and then you can actually start implementing solutions. And that's
right.
kind of the way mental health kind of seems to be, just like in society nowadays. It's starting to gain popularity, but like you said, it is being more reactive than
Hmm.
proactive. And
Yeah.
being proactive can be a huge difference. Like, for example, you notice you might have a little bulge on the side of your tire, and you go down the highway and your tire explodes. Like, well, you could have done something about it. Like, you noticed
Mm,
it, so why don't
right,
just change it out, put your spare on, go to the tire shop, get a new tire, and there you go. But instead,
yeah,
you're going to sit there and have it explode on the side of the road, and now you have all this busy traffic going past you.
yeah,
And so it's kind of like depression hits you, and you're on the side of the road of life, and
right,
all these cars are going past, and now you feel worse. So
right,
why not be proactive and avoid having
right. Right, and
you
those are the two biggest things, right? That I want people to leave every time before we
Mhm.
even get deep into like the specifics of everything is
uh
really knowing that understanding the whole being proactive
mhm.
and the cause and effect, right?
Mhm.
And that the doctors are making the effect the cause, and that
Mhm.
that it doesn't make any sense. That it's like you have to be proactive. You have to
Mm.
look at the cause. And that's so important. when people could just leave with that alone, they're already way ahead, you know?
Yep.
And when they have that perspective of common sense, which is weird, it's really is disappearing. I mean, everything that's happening, even with the political arena, like a lot of it is related with mental health.
Mm.
The things that we argue about, the things we're talking about, is just like nonsense. It's mostly
Mm.
self-esteem issues.
Ego.
Like you're pushing things because you can't accept yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and your self-esteem is not high enough to improve, and you're looking at other things to blame. These are common kind of behaviors of people with mental health issues. They
Mm-hmm.
love blaming other people. It's never their fault. We talked about this a lot at our next last show about
Mm.
accountability.
Yep.
When you're in a bad place, that includes me, guys. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I feel bad for all these like motivational, inspirational speakers that have to almost pretend they're always good. You're
Mm.
not ever going to get that from me. When I'm having a
Mm-mm.
bad day, I'm going to tell you I'm having a bad day because my perspective sucks right now, because it's always shifting. And
Yeah.
so you
Yeah.
need inspiration. And, I
Mm-hmm.
think we talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma doesn't mean it has to be a big event. Trauma can be something so small. Someone says, like, oh, look at your nose. You're uh, in fourth grade. You're
Uh-huh.
shot like
Yep.
forever. It's like it sucks. Little things like that. It really hurts you. So,
Mm-hmm.
but when um, people realize that it's just natural, that
Mm-hmm.
I remember my wife was talking to this girl. I don't know if I mentioned it at the last show, and someone told my wife, like, you got to excuse me, I just lost my, it was a sister, brother, cousin, someone just passed away, so sorry if I'm not being, if I'm a little sad or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, why? You're supposed to be. Like,
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't get it. Why are you apologizing? Because like I don't get it. And so people are now they're in this mission now to get rid of an emotion. And
Mm-hmm.
then when they feel depressed again, like, oh, I didn't get rid of depression. I need more
Yep.
pills. Like, it's still here. I
Yep.
still end up having these thoughts. I'm like, that's natural though. Like, what do
Yeah.
you
No.
mean? you know it's you have to look at what's causing that. What are
Mm-hmm.
you thinking about? What are you focusing on? Things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so, but
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot that goes on with that because, as you said, she's being, uh, well, in that story. Whenever she said, "I'm sorry if I'm going to be a little sad," like, first of all, like, awesome emotional intelligence right there, and then second of all, thanks for being straightforward. But I think she said that because whenever I was going through therapy, we were talking about like why do people like to sit there and console people that are being authentic and with their feelings? And it was because other people are afraid and uncomfortable with being authentic with their own feelings and their own self. So someone sees
Mhm.
someone sad and they're like, "Oh, it's okay, cheer up, it'll be better, smile." And it's because that person doesn't like being sad and they're
Mhm.
uncomfortable feeling that emotion. And you're right. We have to embody the emotion that we're feeling. If we
Oh
don't let it
yeah.
out, it's just going to sit there and pop its head up again, and we're going to be like, "Oh, well,
Yeah.
there it is again." But if we
Yeah.
actually sit there and like hug it and tell it like, "Hey, you're welcome here," it'll
Yeah.
come and go as it pleases, and it's not going to be such a icky feeling, you know.
Right. Kind of
Um,
like I mentioned at the last show.
mhm.
I've said to people before, where when they say they're depressed, I said I'm good. you know
Yeah.
because depression is one of the last stages before you go to acceptance, according to
Mhm.
the stages of grief that we went over: the denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance.
Mhm.
You want to get to the acceptance as soon as possible. And I think that it actually makes a lot of sense, that whole stages of grief. And I
Mhm.
actually came up with this philosophy about loss and found. um,
Mhm.
people that are not in a good place are always focusing on what they're losing or what's been lost,
Mhm.
or whatever, in some way, shape, or form. And I really put a new kind of meaning to the term loser.
Mhm.
um, when I say losers, you have the loser mentalities because you're
Yeah.
focusing on loss, right?
Mhm.
Instead of what you've found. And that's
Yeah.
why, lost and found. And when you do that, it really hurts, your mindset because you're comparing always, all the time, what you've lost, what you're losing, what you've lost,
Mhm.
and you never see what you've gained. Like, people that, uh, make a lot of money, and you think like, dude, how much more do you need? Because they keep thinking of what they haven't reached,
Mhm.
what they're losing. Like, yeah, or people that are investing, like, oh man, I missed out. I could have made 1 million. Oh, I'm sorry, you only made $100,000. Like,
Yeah.
but they won't look at what they found from
Mhm.
their actions. So
Yeah.
those are things that we kind of mentioned. Again, it always every book that you read, it the main goal of all these books, of everything, even what we talk about,
Mhm.
when you listen to people, it's really the most important thing is, have you changed someone's perspective?
Mhm.
Because once
Yeah.
you change your perspective, that's when the decisions follow. And I've mentioned
Mhm.
this before, where look at every guru, every idol that you have, everyone that's gotten out of depression, everything. Like,
Mhm.
it's not because they had took a magic pill, or
Yeah.
because they ate the book, or like, it's the only thing that really changed was their perspective. And the thing is,
Mhm.
it's always constantly shifting back and forth.
Mhm.
I think I mentioned to you, like, it's trauma is kind of the enemy of inspiration.
Mhm. Yep.
You shift towards the negative aspect, and then inspiration brings you back in a positive way. So,
Uh-huh. Yeah, and since you're talking about grief and acceptance, it's kind of like that perspective shift. It's all about trying to find acceptance. And that's totally good and fine and dandy. But the thing is, it's sometimes directed in the wrong light, And you also touched on grief, which I think what happens to a lot of people is that they're actually grieving something that they don't know that they're grieving, and because they don't know that they're grieving it, they can't accept it because that final piece to the puzzle is kind of not there.
oh, that's the denial part.
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
denial part. They're still in the very, very beginning stage. They're
well,
still denying, like, nah, that didn't happen. Like, I don't feel
well,
bad. Like, you know,
kind of. I mean, there's some traumas that take years to work through and some therapies, but I
yeah.
do think that at some level, like for instance, if someone was bullied and they lost a part of themselves in high school, then whenever they get out, they feel like they lost part of their identity. So maybe they didn't
Mhm.
really build that part of themselves back up, so they can't
Right.
really accept it because it wasn't accepted back then. So,
Yeah, and again, that's kind of what we were discussing, or I mentioned before.
mhm,
It's because they're not looking at what they've become. They're
mhm,
looking still at what happened
that they
back in
lost.
and what they
Mhm,
lost. It's like, yeah, but
mhm,
look what you've found today because of that experience. Like,
mhm. It's
and
a
these are the things. Yeah, and so there was the one thing that really got me with that mindset was this book called The Gap and the Gain,
mm,
and they talk about the gap, but I think it's a little more than just gap and gain. That's why I think it's more loss and found.
mm,
One of the things they mentioned on there is you keep comparing yourself with the ideal version of what you think you should have been or be,
uh-huh,
right?
yeah,
And that's where we really start regretting and resenting. Like, those are two major things that really destroy us. Resenting is blaming other people for your situation today. Regret
mhm,
is blaming yourself for what you've done today. And
mhm,
what's funny is both of them are there is a solution to that. Because I have this clothing line, and one of our motto is basically to inspire people to live life without regret and accept
mhm,
challenges worth the risk. And I question it. I'm like, holy crap! Like, can you live with that? How's that? I have regrets, dude. Like, how can I?
mhm,
Is that possible? I'm like, am I being kind of hypocritical here, telling people live life without regrets? So I was just like, I need to know what's going on here. So I'm very analytical. So I
mhm,
started looking at regret. What is regret? What is regret? And then once I found, okay, regrets are just personal experiences we never forgave ourselves for.
mhm,
It's not something you don't regret for someone, you regret what you did, right? So if
or the
that's
lack
what that
of,
is, what's that?
uh-huh,
Yeah.
or the lack
And
of,
the yeah, and the thing is, if it's about things that you didn't forgive yourself, what do you think the cure is?
Forgiving
Gotta
yourself.
forgive yourself, right? So, like, yeah, Kagan, you had this girl, it didn't work out, this and that, because of this happened and this happened. You chose her and you wasted 15 years. Forgive
Mm.
yourself. Like you
Oh,
forgive
poor
yourself,
man.
Same thing with
Uh-huh.
resenting. You blame someone else. This is just forgive them because you're only
Mm-hmm.
hurting you. No one's they're not doing it to you anymore. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're only doing that to you.
Yeah.
Again, it's like the whole gap and gain. Focuses on that, the ideal version, and always
Mm-hmm.
talks about like where you came from, and that's how they were kind of talking about it, like measuring how far you've come since where you've been. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, but sometimes they were awesome in the beginning. They went down, and then you're saying, where did they? To me, it has to start when you made the decision.
Yeah.
That's when you start measuring. When did you make this decision? And then go from there. Who cares what happened in the past? How far have you come from since you've made a decision?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you need to start. And that's when people, you'll see more when you measure what you've found is a
Mm-hmm.
lot more. And I think I talked to you a little bit about focusing on objectives and stuff like that rather than just goals, and we discussed purpose and how
Mm-hmm.
important that is for guidance. And
Yeah.
when you start comparing yourself to just where you've been from the past, it's very difficult, but you have to start where you've made the decision and go from there. And it's better to look at milestones.
Yep.
And hopefully we get some time to talk about the framework that I came up with, actually from my startup experience,
Okay.
um, of all that stuff.
Yeah. And uh it really is that perspective shift, like you're saying, because lost and found, you lose something, you find something. It's not necessarily given to you, per se. It's something
Mhm.
that yeah, inspiration comes and goes, but it's kind of like, what do you do in between those moments of inspiration? Like, is that whenever you just completely let go, you slack off? Is that why you suddenly have, well, life or consequences to deal with later down the road that make you depressed, whenever
Mhm.
really what you're dealing with is consequences from things that you may have done, and now you regret those, but now it's this whole weird cycle that a lot of people don't really understand, that a lot goes into. And
Yeah,
it's go
and it's
ahead.
not even like a weird cycle. It's like people have to understand that it is a cycle.
Yeah, yeah.
It's it's not something that stops. So people that are depressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their goal is to never be depressed again.
Mm-hmm.
Never be depressed again. And if they ever feel some sort of depressed behaviors, I still didn't get rid of depression, which
Mm-hmm.
is complete lunacy. It's
Mm-hmm.
crazy talk. Like you're really trying to get rid of something. That's like saying, oh, Keegan, I'm in shape. I'm in shape forever now. I can eat
Mm-hmm.
whatever the fuck I want. Like, I can do whatever I want now. Like that
uh-huh.
now I'm good. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess I don't need to exercise anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then all of a sudden you gain weight. Man, I still didn't handle my obesity problem because I gained weight again. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
wait, you don't think you have to keep exercising and keep a good diet? Like,
Mm-hmm.
who told you this? And it's
Mm-hmm.
common sense, right? That, 10 push ups ain't going to do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, you have to keep doing it and
Yeah.
for long term, and you have to maintain that. And it's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing with your mental health. So, for
Mm-hmm.
people that think you can just get rid of depression or any negative emotion, that's all it is, an emotional response to your
Mm-hmm.
perspectives. And,
Yeah.
I always say the key word is response. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you responding to? That's the cause. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times, and we went through this too, it's a verb. It's never a noun. You
Yeah.
know, you don't go like, oh, it's my dad, oh, my ex girlfriend. Like, no, what are you
Mm-hmm.
doing current? Because
Mm-hmm.
you're in that position now.
Yeah.
Is currently happening? What are you currently doing? Usually it's what are you currently doing? You're
Uh-huh.
thinking about this, you're acting this way, or something, And so
Mm-hmm.
you really need to look at those things, not just like blaming a noun, because then blaming a noun doesn't do it. Like, oh, it's my because my dad. Like, what does that do? That's nonsense.
Yeah. And it is that mindset of blaming that really is somewhat addictive to some people. because it keeps that accountability off of them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it almost keeps them in that ignorance. And once you know something, you can't unknow it. And
Hmm.
well, I mean, unless you get amnesia of some sorts, but
Or just what do they call it? It's like it's just deliberate. You're blocking
yeah,
it out.
so selective amnesia. Yeah, but it's nice that other people are getting a voice, maybe not a voice, but a platform to come out and actually talk about mental health, how to maybe not change others, but how others can really be affected uh, by a simple perspective shift. And it's
Hmm.
through offering personal stories and stuff like that, those inspirational stories that you read about in books, and actually hearing the story from the person, hearing the emotion that comes with, is really one of those things that I think is going to change the way that all this plays. And you're,
Hmm.
like I said, with podcasts for prevention, you're sitting here and you're essentially, I think you're going to be in the forefront of trying to get podcasters together for making a community about mental health, and specifically, especially with
Yeah.
suicide prevention being on the front line, because that's a huge thing.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that the beautiful part about that, like when you think about suicide prevention, everyone always thinks about a hotline,
Mm-hmm.
right? As prevention. That's what you think of like instantly, the general public. When you
Mm-hmm.
think suicide prevention, like, oh man, you have to have so many people on call, right?
Mm-hmm.
But no one's talking about the being proactive. And the beautiful part about the podcasts for prevention campaign is helping
Mm-hmm.
people like yourself talking, whether there's 5 listeners or 100,000 listeners.
Mm-hmm.
We're helping someone out. And the cool thing, like you mentioned, is like it's the intimacy of the conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you can get someone to understand while they're listening and they're talking, it becomes a different thing than just reading something. And this
Mm-hmm.
is what I mean about inspiration. People get confused on what motivation and inspiration is. Inspiration is just this involuntary or non-voluntary exposure to something. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what they were gonna hear, they just got exposed to it, and then
Mm-hmm.
and that's what really inspires people. It's not a forced thing like, hey, listen to this because I'm gonna be talking about that, because that's when people go, I'm good. Even though
Uh-huh.
they know they need it, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's why inspiration is very important. So when you need to change your perspective, you have to know, like, well, you need more inspiration. You have
Mm.
to expose yourself to it. You don't know what that's gonna be. You don't know
Mm-hmm.
what the perfect thing is, but whether that's why reading self-improvement books, watching good movies, or things like that, all of a sudden something will just hit you, or podcasts.
Uh-huh.
You don't know what the discussion's going to be, but then you might go, holy crap,
Mm-hmm.
and then relate with it, and all of a sudden it makes sense, and you follow through. And once you
Mm-hmm.
change that perspective, man, it like the decisions follow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I kind of did kind of my philosophy is really reverse engineering everything. Like,
Uh-huh.
well, if we're the product of our decisions, then what the hell makes us decide things?
Mm-hmm.
That's when I was looking at, like, it's really just a perspective. And like, yeah, it makes sense because the situation's the same, nothing's
Mm-hmm.
changed. I didn't win $1 million, or no one, you know like, it's like I have the same exact situation. I just really have to have a different perspective on my situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I've mentioned, I mentioned this on talking to someone, and they wrote it back to me how it hit them. I said to her that it's not that you have a shitty life; you just have a shitty perspective on life. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it, I mean, it just goes full circle right back to that perspective. Uh, but I can't wait to get even more like authors and stuff of those self improvement books, because I get to sit there and have those intimate conversations, and I get to share that with everyone. But then
mhm,
you kind of get a glimpse behind the scene of the book, behind the cover, behind the pages and everything. You get to meet the author, or people like yourself. You get to meet these inspirational people, and through that inspiration, you never, like you said, you never know which way a discussion is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And what's great about that is you had also mentioned that you have to expose yourself to it,
Yeah.
and you don't always know what that is, and that's what life is doing for someone that isn't in that uh, find mindset. I think
Right.
that
Mm-hmm.
lost mindset,
Yeah.
the decisions are being made for you because you're not
Mm-hmm.
someone's not sitting there actively making those decisions, and if they
Yeah.
are, then it goes back to the, well, they can't forgive themselves, because I know I've done that plenty of times, and that was one
We
of the
all do.
hardest things to do. Yeah, it is one of the
Right.
hard things
Regret
to
is the
do.
hardest one. The regret is the hardest one. When you blame yourself, that's probably one of the biggest destroyers. Even when it comes to things um you think you're blaming other people, but really you're blaming yourself for getting yourself in that situation,
Mm-hmm.
and then you blame the person. But
Yep.
the thing that's really killing you, I shoulda, woulda, coulda, shoulda, woulda,
Uh-huh.
coulda. Yeah, Keegan, you did it. So let it go. And the thing is, it's not about just letting go. It's
Mm-hmm.
because you haven't forgiven yourself. That's why you can't let go.
Yep.
And it's very, very important to to
Mm-hmm.
to do that. And you know those are the type of things that kind of holds you back. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
with my the motto included live life without regret, because
Mm-hmm.
you can't move forward unless you let go of something from the past that has something
Mm-hmm.
more with like the past tense, right? Like what's happened.
Yeah.
And you can't focus on that, and you have to realize like we're all constantly changing, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to remember this. It's like, and you're trying to stay the same. This when they talk about the fixed mindset. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is people is just has such a hard time um, changing their blueprint in life.
Mm-hmm.
The best example would be a breakup. All of a sudden, you can't see a different future because you were so set with this
Mm-hmm.
one girl or this relationship that
Mm-hmm.
you're so heartbroken and you can't think of any other future without them. All of a sudden, you
Yeah.
meet someone else and forgotten because now you can see something else.
Mm-hmm.
People get depressed not sometimes not because of anything else other than they just can't see the future. You know,
Yeah.
um, but like I said before, you have to be proactive in things. But always, that's why our nonprofit is called Start Day One. We
Mm-hmm.
really want to change people's perspective. Instead of waiting for one day, you got to start day one. That's where it all
Mm-hmm.
starts. And I'm not saying start day one means you're going to be running a marathon tomorrow. You can't have that mindset. What I'm saying is, once you decide, your
Mm-hmm.
world changes.
Mm-hmm.
That's like people going to rehab without making that decision to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they don't get better because you actually haven't made a decision, huh?
Mm-hmm.
You you went, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but you
Like,
actually
where?
didn't decide to get better. Like, that's different.
Yeah. Like, did you go because you were court ordered, or did you go because you wanted your
Yeah,
life to change? Uh,
right.
and
And
you can
so,
see that mindset in there too.
oh, it's so difficult to like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, it happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships, like it's because they haven't made the decision. And,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna one of the things that I started looking at, like as a startup founder, I
Uh-huh.
started seeing things that you can always implement um, into the personal life.
Mm-hmm.
I call it the E-cycle framework. Uh,
Okay.
Basically, it stands for envision, execute, evaluate, evolve.
Okay.
It's just something I developed through my experience as a startup founder. I learned early on that the way we approach building a business, always changing, adjusting, refining, can be applied
Mm-hmm.
to our personal lives, right? So
Yeah.
it's really just a process for personal growth. Um,
Ah.
I, the idea is that transformation, it's not
Mm-hmm.
a one-time thing. It's something you keep working at.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a cycle. Remember I was telling you before, like a cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
A
Yep.
cycle that never ends. It starts with envisioning your future self.
Mm-hmm.
So this is more than just setting a goal, like I want to be healthier or I want to make more money.
Uh-huh.
It's really about thinking about who you want to become, your
Mm.
personality, and current circumstances aren't set in stone. You have
Mm.
the ability to reshape them. So the
Uh-huh.
vision you create becomes your guiding kind of your guide. Then
Mhm.
from there, you move on to execute. And so when it comes to, business, and vision means like you have to come up with a mission, you have to figure out what the brand is going to be, who you're going to target. Like, you have to think about all these things, right? So
Mhm.
basically, you're applying that. The envisioning is because unless you know what you're going to be in the future, then you don't know what you're going to be. If you can't
Yeah.
envision yourself being healthier, if you're depressed, or if you're an alcoholic, or if you can't picture that and that's who you want to become, well, how are you going to get there? It's not
Mhm.
going to happen. And so that's what envisioning really means. From
Hmm.
there, you move to execute. And
Yeah.
here's where a lot of people get stuck, right? They
Mhm.
always wait for the perfect plan, the right
Mhm.
moment. I'm going
Yeah.
to leave this relationship at this time. I'm not going to quit smoking yet until this.
Mhm.
Um, in reality, execution is really just about taking action,
Mhm.
even when things aren't perfect.
Yeah.
In the startup world, you basically test things, you experiment, and the same applies to our personal lives.
Mhm.
Everything are assumptions. You don't know what's going to work. You don't know what you're going to like. They're all assumptions until you get feedback or data. That's what I always say in the startup world. Until
Yeah.
you get feedback or data, everything you're saying about your business is kind of just an assumption. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, so you try all these different approaches, different marketing tactics, different um, products, different ways of doing your products. So you kind of have to step out of your comfort zone to keep moving forward.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how you do business. You always have to think about, or you have to just execute. We call it the minimum viable product, right? From
Uh-huh.
there, you keep adjusting and changing based on what you've done, but it applies in your personal self. Well, what are you
Mm.
doing?
Mhm.
Then comes the evaluate. So
No.
after you take that action, that's when you
Mhm.
step back and look at the results. Well, what worked? What
Mhm.
didn't? What surprised you? You know, it's not about beating yourself up if things
Mhm.
didn't go perfectly. It's
Mhm.
about gathering more data. You
Yeah.
figure out what you learned from those experiences.
Mhm.
So you really need to evaluate. So when it comes to startups, like I said, everything's an assumption. So you
Uh-huh.
keep just trying different things. Does this work? Does this work? And that's why businesses always change. Groupon wasn't Groupon when it first started. Airbnb was not the Airbnb we know today when it started. It was just a freaking, again, an airbed.
Uh-huh.
Now it's freaking full on houses.
Mhm.
So, but they tried to figure out where they fit in, how it's going to be, and they have to have a mission. What's your purpose? Things like that.
Uh-huh.
And then finally, that's where you get to evolve.
Yeah.
Um, with the feedback from the evaluation phase, you have
Mhm.
to adjust. And there's this book called The Lean Startup that discusses this. This is where you pivot or you
Mhm.
persevere. So you
Mm.
either change your ways,
Mhm.
or if it's working, then go freaking all out, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So you refine your approach, maybe tweak your vision a little bit. Sometimes your vision changes, you
Yeah.
know, and then you repeat the process. So the beauty of the e-cycle, I call it, is that
Uh-huh.
it's not linear. It's an ongoing loop. You have to keep
Mhm.
doing this. Like I mentioned before, it's a cycle. People have to understand it's a cycle. It's something you have to keep going. You have to keep evolving as a person, because you're always striving for the future version of yourself that you want to be. So obviously, you're always the Keegan 5 years ago is not the same Keegan I'm talking to now. And 5 years from now, it's not going to be the same dude.
Nope.
So you're always evolving, and I hope you're always evolving. The ones
Mhm.
that are fixed are the ones that are in trouble.
Mhm.
So, and you have to be flexible. You have to allow things to change. You have to
Mhm.
know that things are not going to be the same for things to change. You have to change
Mhm.
something for something to change. And so that's really what the framework is about. It's about being proactive about things that you do. You're not just
Mhm.
waiting for life to change. You're taking control. You shape who you want to become. Kind of like again, I always think of the startups. The ones that
Uh-huh.
fail are the ones that don't keep on doing this. Once they
Yep.
stop doing it, they fail. Each time you go through that cycle, that's you get closer to the person you've envisioned. And again, every time you envision, it's someone in the future. So
Mhm.
every once you move forward, the future is ahead again, right?
Yep.
So you're always learning and evolving along the way. So
Mhm.
basically, just to sum it up, you envision your future self, execute by taking action, you evaluate your progress, and then evolve based on everything you've learned. And you just keep
Mm.
repeating that process over and over and over again until you become that future version of yourself.
Wow, that's a really awesome. And I love that because it's also really good analytical way to look at personal growth and progress.
Hmm.
Uh, because you, like you said, you're very analytical whenever it comes to like the tech stuff, and your found up starter, which uh, uh, did I say that right? Startup founder. There we go.
Startup founder, yeah.
um, but you are really embodying that whole what movie is that where he has the no regrets tattoo but it's spelt wrong,
Yeah,
uh
yeah.
and
Oh,
so
yeah.
but he's so happy to show it off,
Yeah.
and and it's either he's ignorant about it or he doesn't care. And it's kind of like my philosophy changed because it used to be like, oh no, poor me, I regret everything. And for me it turned into, well, if I'm going to regret something, I'd rather regret the things that I did and not the things that I didn't do. And
Mm,
so that has made me change a lot of the things that I do or don't do now, because
yeah.
it's kind of like I
I
would
mean, it's
rather,
I
yeah.
think it's both, like
Yeah.
again, it's really like the real question is seriously,
Mhm.
you never know the right
Mm-mm.
choices,
Until
right?
you, yep.
And it's really about how you deal with the consequences.
Yep.
That is it. When you do something, the biggest
Mhm.
question is when you make that decision, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive yourself?
Yeah.
If not, don't do it.
That's a good
Don't do it.
that's a good one, because you could have
Yeah.
everything behind you pushing you for that decision, and if you can't forgive yourself, you
If
can't
you,
go
if,
through with
yeah,
it.
right. So it's not about, they always say that, oh, you always regret more the ones you did. Yeah, but I still regret the ones I did, dude. Like, let's erase those parts. That's the
Yeah.
reason you freaking didn't do that thing you regretted, is because you kept doing the stupid stuff.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, yeah, kind of either way, it's a regret, dude.
Mhm.
And it's really, again, if that's what regret is, then we have to talk about, like, well, can you forgive yourself after you make
Mhm.
this decision based on the consequences
Yep.
or not? Because you're going to be in deep, really deep trouble if you can't forgive yourself if things go wrong.
Hmm. And that's all part of the whole cycle, the cycle. You're going through testing the waters. It's
Right.
essentially sounds like a trial of process of elimination. Uh,
Yeah, it's sort of. It's not really process of elimination. So when you're in business, right,
hmm.
you're always constantly doing these things to improve, right?
Hmm.
Because you don't know. And that's the biggest thing. That's the premise behind it, is that, when you do these businesses, you think you know everything like that, but that's just the idea.
Hmm.
And that's why a mission is very important. When you don't know what your mission is, again, a lot of times people don't create a good mission, or they think they
Hmm.
have to find a mission, like I mentioned to you,
Uh-huh.
but they don't create a good mission. And again, a mission is also a verb. It has to be a verb, and it
Hmm.
has to benefit or provide value to other people, not yourself. And so when you're
Hmm.
not thinking about what value are you producing, value are you giving as a business, it's kind of easier
Hmm.
to do that, right?
Yeah.
But when people are talking about their own purpose, it's like, well, focus on what value are you giving to society as your purpose as a dad.
Hmm.
There's multiple purposes: as a
Yeah.
dad, as an employee, as a musician, or whatever it is that you're into. What's
Hmm.
your purpose in that aspect? You have to ask yourself these things, because that's what's
Hmm.
going to guide you with your perspective, because your perspective is either going to be a threat or a benefit, and that's how you know which left or right.
Hmm.
Like, well, I don't know, is it a threat or a benefit to your purpose? If it's a threat, don't freaking go that way. Like, what are you doing? Like, then go this way. But until you have your purpose, you don't
Hmm.
really know where the North Star is.
Yeah.
So that gets very difficult. But again, it's really like this ongoing process that you don't know. And that's the
Hmm.
best thing, right? That we have to tell these people with mental health issues. It's like, dude, no one knows what's going to work for you, man.
Mm-hmm.
And you are the startup. The thing about the evaluation stage,
Mm-hmm.
I said envision, execute, and then evaluate after you execute, is like you really have to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to kind of be honest with yourself. It's easier as the business because you
Get
you
third party.
execute. Right. The customers are telling you, like, dude,
Mm-hmm.
red sucks. Or, this website is like, I'm not clicking on it. Like, man, why aren't they clicking on it? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I got to change the layout. Or, but you're getting feedback in a real legit way. But when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to yourself and you're the customer, you're giving yourself the survey questions. Oh man. So how are you feeling today? Awesome. Check. Like, are you though? Like, are you awesome right now?
Uh-huh.
Or are you still missing your girl?
Mm-hmm.
Like you really have that's the hard part of the evaluation
Mm-hmm.
stage. But the ones that you can control is the execution part, right? And then you see
Mm-hmm.
the progress. What can you measure? Things like that is the evaluation part. What you
Mm-hmm.
execute on, you you know that's why envisioning is so important, and the book Lean Startup doesn't talk about that, and I'm like, it's kind of missing an element there, because how do you know where to move forward to unless you
Mm-hmm.
have this? So that's when I came up with the four stages. It's like you have to envision first, like
Uh-huh.
until you know that, or until you can even do that, I don't know how I'm going to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Like from your experience, if you couldn't see yourself getting out of addiction, it's like, well, if you can't see that, like, or you don't even want to see that,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, because the question is like, dude, is it impossible, or you just don't know how? Like,
Yeah.
is it impossible? If that's not the case, then so you're telling me there's a chance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So and that's where people get messed up, is when they're being told, like, oh, there's nothing you can do about it, Keegan.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not you. It's a chemical imbalance. It's not you. It's not you. You're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, well, what's the cure? Oh, I have these pills.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
that's the cure.
yeah, it's the fast and easy way to cure the chemical imbalance. Whenever in reality you can do exercise, diet, and all
Yeah,
this other stuff that doesn't rely on pharmaceuticals. So.
right. And again, it's like, it's because people aren't looking at the cause of things. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times, the chemical imbalance they're even talking about is mostly cortisol related.
Mm-hmm.
It's because when you freaking stress out, your fight and flight response freaking kicks in,
Mm-hmm.
cortisol kicks in, and that's why you look freaking like a mess. I mean, you can tell someone that's not in a good place and someone that's
Mm-hmm.
happy. You say you're glowing, and these are real things. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think I mentioned it to you before. It's called mind over medicine. How
Mm-hmm.
your mind can really control your physiology, and
Mm-hmm.
you really have to think about these things. And as far as the cause and effect goes, it's like, dude, you keep looking at the effects. You have to stop doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like, I think we talked about that. Like, oh, yoga helps me, get through the day and this and that. Like, yeah, but that's not the cause. Like, what's the
Mm-hmm.
cause though? And it wasn't the lack of yoga. So
Yeah.
that means you're gonna keep doing, like, you have to keep doing yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel bad for some people that have to now get addicted to that, because it's the only escape. And really, it's just another form of addiction, just
Mm-hmm.
like alcohol. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's really a way of numbing yourself, to stay away from the actual cause of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's obviously it's a great solution so far, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes it's really freaking fun. So it's really hard to get rid of, because it's like, well, I'm freaking having a good time. Better this than that version.
Yeah.
And it's sad, it sucks, but it's really
Mm-hmm.
just that's what their perspective is on
Yeah. And
it.
you're entirely right because, like you said, with the yoga stuff, for example, it works in the moment and for a little bit after, but it doesn't have those effects that you are looking for because it's kind of like weeding your garden. Like you're trying to grow certain fruits, like you're trying to grow your happy fruits, and you have these little things pop up, and you're just pulling the leaves off the weed, but you're not actually pulling at the root. And that same
Mm-hmm.
weed is going to come back. But you're sitting there and really trying to figure out, what do I do about the soil? How do I take care of the roots coming in the first place? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that's great, uh, because that reaction is what everyone seems to be leaning on nowadays. Kind of like what we mentioned earlier. We're sitting there trying to say that it's essentially no one's fault for any health issue. Whenever in reality, you have people that traumatize other people. You have yourself that traumatizes your own self, and
Mm-hmm.
then you have yourself that doesn't forgive self, and then so on and so forth. But you're really sitting there trying to say, look, here's a framework that you can use to help you arrive to your purpose through your mission. And there we go. Like, that's a great way to change a perspective for something, because I know for
Mm-hmm.
myself, like you said, if I couldn't see myself out of addiction in the future, like, could I at least try to, or did I want to? And that
Yeah.
was a big one, was I didn't want to for the longest time.
Yeah.
But
And it's right. It's and the want to. It's like, again, it's like having a business. Like, imagine
mm-hmm,
starting a business and not seeing what it's gonna be. like,
mm-hmm.
like, do you think it's gonna make it? You
Yeah,
know what I mean? It's like, do you think you're gonna choose to do things? What are you gonna execute on then if you don't
yeah,
envision something? Like, how are you gonna execute on a business that you don't even know? I'm gonna open a restaurant. Oh, okay. Like, what restaurant?
mm-hmm,
I just want to open a restaurant.
yeah,
like, good luck, man. So what are you
uh-huh,
gonna what food like what's the menu gonna be like? If you don't know what it's gonna be, so like, what products do you buy? So you're
uh-huh,
shot. You're completely, that's when people say I'm lost. It's like,
uh-huh,
well, if you don't know who you're gonna be, that's where purpose and all that stuff comes in. It's like, well, that's gonna be very tough.
mm-hmm,
And again, it's really just shifting everyone's perspectives and what they think they are, like
mm-hmm,
um, everyone assumes that this is the final version of themselves and that it's never going to
mm-hmm,
be different in the future. Um, but when I tell people, like, and I give them this scenario when uh, if you talk to someone older and they tell you their story of where they came in and what they did, and like, you can even watch all these different movies that we see now, and then
mm-hmm,
at the very end they humble themselves, and you're
uh-huh,
like, oh, what a cool dude, like, what an experience, that's so nuts, that's so crazy.
uh-huh,
And it's funny that people can't understand this whole cause and effect thing, and we see it
mm-hmm,
all the time.
mm-hmm,
um, People think like, well, that's who I am, that's my identity. It's like, oh, you told you that.
uh-huh,
So, okay. So you're telling me you can never change. So you're Mr. Darth Vader, but Darth Vader changed. Why?
uh-huh,
Right? And the thing is, how did Darth Vader become Darth Vader? His perspective sucked, right?
yeah,
That's the only reason he became Darth Vader. He always thought like this and that, and you're out to get me, and this and that's it. The situation was the same. The dude was
mm-hmm,
bad. Like, he was a
mm-hmm,
bad dude. He
mm-hmm,
was the skillful. You're supposed to balance the force. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? And all it was his perspective. Nothing changed.
mm-hmm,
Nothing
yeah,
changed. He didn't get electrocuted, and then finally he goes, all right, I'm gonna save my son. Like, his perspective shifted on it and said, like, oh man, wait a minute, what am I doing? Like,
mm-hmm,
this is not the way it's supposed to go. Crap. You know what? I think I will kill this guy.
uh-huh,
And it's funny, you always see these um uh when you see these, people can understand it in movies, but they don't
mm-hmm,
understand themselves.
mm-hmm,
That's who they've become, it because of their perspective from based on their experiences, but doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to stay the
mm-hmm,
same. You know, you it really always depends. Your personality and your identity is more based on who you want to be,
mm-hmm,
not who you were.
yeah,
Like, no one really cares about who you were in the past, but
mm-hmm,
who you're gonna be, people are actually really more concerned about. You know,
mm-hmm,
And that's what you should really be talking about. And
Mm-hmm.
when you keep dwelling on things that happened to you in the past, it's kind of like, if you take yourself out of your body, it's like, okay, when are you going to stop
Mm-hmm.
talking about this? It's always this.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah. Um, and I love the Darth Vader reference because that will help a lot of people actually kind of get that idea of what a perspective shift looks like in real time.
yeah, yeah.
Because we
I,
have
I,
it.
I love metaphors. And when
Mm-hmm.
I can find something that can help someone understand, it's
Mm-hmm.
so much better because they just take it in so much quicker. Kind of like when I use the metaphor of driving when
Mm-hmm.
you're lost.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier for people to understand. Like, yeah, that is kind of weird.
Yeah.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
lost, but I'm not like pulling over to really figure out where I'm going.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's weird, right? Like if you're in a car and you did that's weird, right? Well, yeah, at least now you know you're doing that, and you're gonna now pause and think about your life a little bit.
Yeah.
But things like that, it just helps. Just it just helps people understand it so much better.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been a great thing to always find something that I can latch on to,
Mm-hmm.
like kind of like my snowboarding story.
Mm-hmm.
And the cool thing is like it's kind of sticks to you. Remember how I was talking about going through the glades, going through the
Uh-huh.
trees, and avoiding the
Yep.
trees, but look at the path between the trees.
Uh-huh.
And then you just visualize trying to avoid problems, and you keep hitting the problems because you keep
Mm-hmm.
focusing on the problems.
Yep.
So it's like hitting
Mm-hmm.
the damn trees when you're snowboarding. It's like, dude, you got to look at the path between the trees, and the trees almost disappear. The same
Mm-hmm.
thing with your problems, whether it's an ex-boyfriend and, oh, I don't want to find someone like him again. Avoid,
Mm-hmm.
avoid, avoid. Boom, same thing.
Yep.
So it's like it's harder. It's better if you stay on the path and focus on the path, and everything else will kind of go away on its own,
Mm-hmm.
because of your purpose. All of a sudden, instead of trying to avoid alcohol, avoid alcohol, avoid alcohol, it's like you just know, like, yeah, but alcohol is not going to get me where I want to go. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't even, you don't even fiend for it because it's like, it's kind of a waste of my time. I want to wake up tomorrow, dude. I can't. I got not
Mm-hmm.
even no effort, zero effort in going
Yep.
like, I really can't. I really don't want to. Like
Yeah.
it's a lot. It just becomes more natural. You don't even
Yeah.
think about it. You know.
Yep. And that's the whole point of changing your perspective, making it second nature to look more on the bright side of things and not necessarily be reactive. Um,
Hmm.
and so I do want to keep talking, but we are at the end of the episode. We can catch you back on again, and next time we'll be figuring out how podcast for prevention is going and growing, stuff like that. And by the way, where can people check out Start Day One again?
So you can go to startday1.org, and
Okay.
if you want to donate um, towards the podcasts for prevention. I believe Keegan here should have his link somewhere where you're watching this, or you can
Mm-hmm.
text podcasts uh, to the number 44321, and it'll send you a link about the podcast for prevention. You can look for Keegan's team if you want to support him. By supporting the Start Day One, you're basically supporting him and everything he's trying to do. So we just really want to give back to what he's doing here. He's, everyone's kind of helping each other out in the mental health space through the podcast for prevention. And yeah, and overall, we're just Start Day One. If you just want to donate to our Start Day One, we're just really trying to distribute more positive content and trying to send speakers out to different venues like schools, rehab centers, military bases, wherever they really could use the services for free. That's what we're
Mm-hmm.
really trying to do is, instead of people saying that we don't have the budget for it, it's like it's free. Please
Mm-hmm.
let us send someone to your school.
Yeah.
Like for free. Come on, man. So
Yep.
that's really the entire goal here. But I think podcasts, uh, the intimate conversations that we have can reach more people. So
Mm-hmm. Yep. Uh, well, it is always a pleasure speaking to you. And yes, please, if anyone can check out Start Day One and contribute to the cause, that'd be awesome because we need to get the community train rolling and going, and we can't do it all alone. But also, I know we don't necessarily like to do reactive stuff, but the thing is, we do have a suicide hotline that whenever it is in a crisis mode, it is something good to have just in case. And that number is 988. For anyone that is in a crisis, we can teach our loved ones and our friends and children, even if we dear hope never need to, but they can teach other people how to dial 988 in the middle of a crisis. Because, I mean, we can teach other people how to dial 911. So why not 988? But next time we have you on, we'll be speaking all about that. We'll see where it's going, and I'll see if I can come up with a e-cycle evaluation for myself.
Nice. Love it.
So, well, it's been a pleasure having you on, Ricardo. Is there anything else you would like to say before the audience? Before we
No,
go.
so please, we'd really love your support. So come to startday1.org. We're going to be doing a compilation of different podcasters that we get involved with, putting it in our blog. We're going to be putting a lot of our views. So I'll go more into kind of like little snippets of different aspects of our philosophies that'll really help shift your perspectives and hopefully help you out. Really just compiling a lot of information that, again, the main goal is just really shifting people's perspectives, whether it's for you or for someone else. Please visit us and help us change the global perspective on mental health, from a reactive one to a proactive one.
Awesome. Sounds good. And I'm on board with you. So let's see who all comes on board with us. So until next week, we'll see you later. And Ricardo, we'll see you in another few weeks or so.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And recording stopped. All right.